Carrie Butchie from Ohio State University in Mansfield and the Math Literacy Initiative. And we decided that we wanted to offer some math help for those of you who are working at home with parents or guardians. So we're going to start today. Every Wednesday at 1 o'clock we'll be on live Facebook. And if you have questions either from one of your children or someone you're taking care of, or if you're an older student and you want to just type in your question, we can deal with that too. So we have the first question, and it's about percentage. So the task is we want to figure out what the federal taxes are for $84,210. So we have to figure out what percent means first, right? So what is a percent? So let's talk about percent. Percent means for every cent, or if you think about cent like century, that's 100. So for every 100, so that's what this means. For every 100, that's percent. So if we have 24%, that's how we read this symbol. So 24%, and we want to know what that is, we need to know first what it means. So what that means is 24 out of 100. So that's just kind of an abstract thing right there too. So what does that mean? What does 24 out of 100 mean? So if we have this rectangle, and we say that that's everything of whatever the thing is that we're talking about, we want 24 out of that 100. So if this is 100, this would be, if we looked at just something like this, let's say this was 100, what would that be? That piece right there. So that would be, if this whole thing is 100, the whole thing is 100, and we split it into two equal parts, that means this one is 50, and that one's 50. So if we look at it, if you think about it pictorially, that means that out of a percent, it's the whole thing. That whole thing is 100. What is that little piece of it? So we sometimes bump into fractions really fast when we're doing percents, and that's not really the best way to do percentages. We need to really think about what that means first. So we can figure out this 50 because we know 100 divided by 2 is 50/50. But let's think about this, and let's just draw some more pictures to think about what those percents mean. So again, if we think about this as all 100, and we know there's 100 in this altogether, and we wanted to split it then into 4 pieces, then we know we have 100 altogether. What would each of those 4 pieces be? So if we have 25 and 25 and 25 and 25, that means 100. So if we wanted to do something like, if this would be 25%, 25%, remember, means 25 out of 100, and that would be like this chunk right here. So if we have 25%, it's like a quarter. So you split it into 4 pieces, and you split it into 4 pieces because that's what 100 is. So 25 goes in that 4 times. Let's look at this one. So now, again, that whole thing is 100, and let's say we wanted to find out what 10% is. So 10%. So what does that mean? That means 10 out of 100. So if this whole thing is 100, and we want to split it up into 10 equal parts. When you split it up into parts, if you're doing a 5, it's best to put the middle chunk there and then put the other 2 on the side. So let's see. So we have 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, and 100. So if we add all these things up, we know we have 100 because we started with 100. We still have to have 100 in there. So 10% would be 10 out of 100. That's this little chunk right here. So a lot of times, this is 50%. So we have a quarter, or 25%, 50%, and 10%. Those are like the quick percentages to find. So if you think about it, if this is 100, let's just look at this 10% piece for just a second. So let's say, instead of that whole thing being 100, let's say it's 50. So I'm going to make another one. I'm going to split it into, so I want to know what 10% of 50 is now. So it's the same diagram, same exact diagram that we have here, only instead of 100 and passing the 100 out into those 10 pieces, we have 50. We're going to pass 50 out into these 10 pieces. So if we have 10 pieces here, then that means we have 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50. So 10% of that would be that 110 chunk of the 50. So that 110 chunk of the 50 would be right there. So what is 10% of 50? 10% of 50 is 5. What is 10% of 100? 10% of 100 is 10. Let's look at, let's say we had 40. No, let's do this one. Let's say we have 24. Is that our number? Yep, 24. Let's look at what 10% of 24 is. So let's stick with our 10s for just a second here. 10% of 24. So we know when we have this whole, this is our whole chunk. It's just we're changing what that whole chunk is. In this one, the whole chunk is 100. In this one, the whole chunk is 50. And in this one, the whole chunk will be 24. So we're just going to split this up into our 10s again. So I'm splitting right here. But now we have to figure out, okay, if we split this up into 10, how much is each one of those worth? So what did we do here? We had our 100 and we split it up into 10, so 10 divided by 10, or excuse me, 100 divided by 10 was 10. What did we do here? We have 50, 50 divided by 10 is 5. So now we have to think 24 divided by 10, which that's not a very nice number, right? So we know that it's going to be at least more than 2. So let's say 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. So we used up 20 of those. So now we have 4 more that we have to pass out. Now this one isn't a really nice number, but it will help us. So we have 4, and now we have that 4, and we have to split that 4 up into these 10 pieces. So I'm just going to show you what we're doing. We're going to take that 4 and divide it by 10. And this 4/10 is the same thing, if you remember back to your decimals, 4/10 is the same thing as this, right? Because this is the 10th place. So if we take that 4 and we divide it into those 10 chunks, we know that we have to put an extra 0.4 on these. All right. So why did we do that again? We did it because we know that the whole is split into 10 different pieces. And so each of those pieces is a 2.5. So now let's look at this, because patterns in math are one of the ways that we figure things out. So we want to look at some patterns. So when we found 10% of 100, that gave us, let's look over here, that gave us 10, right? Because each of these chunks was 10. When we found 10% of 50, look what we found. We found that that's 5. So each of those pieces is 5. And then when we found 10% of 24, we found that each of those piece sizes were 2.4. So now let's look for a pattern. So we have this number 100. And we want to know what 10% of it is. Then we ended up with this. And then we have this 50, and we ended up with this. And then we have this, and we ended up with this. So let's look at what's the pattern that we're seeing. In these numbers, our decimal is right here because they're whole numbers. So that means of a whole. So if we want to look at this, and this is kind of speeding into the next section. So I would draw pictures until you get that down, and then go into something that looks like this. So you want to end up with this only when you really understand why these things are happening, because the whys are so important. So if we look at this decimal and we say, okay, 10% of 100 is 10, that means if we imagine that this is the 0 from this 100, we actually took this and bumped it over, just like that. So same thing here, we have 50, I'm going to just put in that 0 for the 50, but the only difference between this side and this side, we have this 50 now, is that this decimal got moved over. So that moved over 1 spot. And the same thing here. So we have this, and we have our 24 right here. And again, here's the decimal. And when you move it into 10%, we just proved it with our drawing, that you move this decimal over here. Now, too soon, or too often, people just try to memorize this stuff, and that's not gonna help you down the road. So you wanna really think about what these percentages mean. So 10% of 24 is 2.4. So now we have to think about this. So we know that we want to figure out 24% of 84,210. So let's think about what we could do with that. So let's draw a picture, because we've been using pictures so far. So I'm going to draw a picture. This one. So now it's not out of 100. So this particular question, our whole, everything that's in there goes, this is our 100. So that's going to be 84,000. So let's put that up. So this is 84,210. All right. Now they want to know 24%. So I'm going to show you something that will help us to understand this just a little bit more. So we want to know 24%. Well, if we want to know 24%, that's the same thing as a 10%, or let's say a 20% and a 4%. Okay, so we could look at this as a 20% and a 4%. Or we could look at it as a 10%, a 10%, and a 4%, right? We could do that. So, and why would we want to? So let's think about it. When we figured out what 10% of each of these things is, we figured that out by just moving that decimal point over, and we proved it again over there. So you can't do one of these quickies unless you prove that it works every time. So I could, if I wanted to, think about this and think about 10% of this. I'm going to do 10% first. All right, so I split it into my tens. So 10%. Now remember what we just said. 10% of one of these things, you move that decimal over. So without even throwing it into the calculator, we know, because we've shown it with these different things, that 10% is really just moving that thing over there. So we know that each of these is worth 84,210. So 8,421. And so on. So each of these is worth 8,421. So this is 10%, remember? So if we don't want 10%, we want 24%. So there's 10%, and another one would be another 10%, which is 20%. So that means 20% of these is two of these chunks together. So here's 2, 4, 8, 16. So what is this? This is 20%. Okay? So we found a solid 20%, and we found it, I'm not even using a calculator. We're just moving decimal points around because we're dividing by multiples of 10. And that's how we can do multiples of 10. So we put this on. Now we need 4%. 4%. So here's what I'm going to do with 4%, because I don't want to use a calculator, and I don't want to do long division or all that nonsense. So I'm going to look at this in terms of 4%. Now, if we look at this, remember we said that this one column is 10%. If this is 10%, I should be able to split this into 10 more pieces. And when I split that into 10 more pieces, we'd have 10 divided by 10, which is 1. So what does that mean? That means that each of these little pieces right here is 1%. So if each of those little pieces is 1%, and we need 4%, we need 4 of those little pieces. 2, 3, 4. Now we need to know what that little piece is worth. So what is the little piece worth? Well, we know that we have this in that one column. So that one column is worth 8,421, and we want a tenth of that because I split it into these 10 chunks. So now, remember, when we figured out 10% of this, we just moved that decimal point over. So we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to take this, and we're going to move that over here, because that's how we divide it by 10. Now, why are we dividing it by 10? Because we have the whole thing, and we want to know just this one little piece of it, and that's 1/10 of it. So that's why we have to, when we learned how to multiply and divide by powers of 10, that means 10, 100, 1,000, so on, then we can just move these decimal points over. So we're playing with our numbers in a way that makes sense and that's efficient, and we don't have to have a calculator. So now what do we know? We know that each of these little pieces in here is 842.2. Why? Because we took this over here and we moved it in, and we did that because we had to split it into 10 chunks. So what do we need? We need 4%, so we need 4 of these things. So we have that, 842.1, 842.1, so there's 4 of them. We have 4, 2, 4, 6, 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, that's 16, because that, whoops a doodle, 16. 8 times 4 is 32, plus another one is 33. So now we have a decimal here. All right, so now we figured out the 4% one. So now we have a 20% because we found 10% and then another 10%, and then we have another 4%. So now we just need to put all this stuff together. So let's slap it all together. So here's the 20. Remember we did that one first. So we have 16,842, that's our 20%. Let's just make a note over here. And then we have our 4. So 4% is, what do we say, 3,368.4. So let's just add those things together. So we have 10, 11, 12, oh, interesting. All right, holy moly. So, our federal taxes on this thing is $20,210.40. 40 because this is a 4, and then our penny piece will be over there. All right. So let's think. Does that sound right? Does it feel right? Does it sound right? And let's look at it and see if it does. So I'm gonna put that next one here. Here's what we have again. Remember, this is the whole thing, and we have $84,210, and 24% is about really close to 25%. And we know 25% is a quarter. 25% would mean 25 chunks. So there's 25, 25, 25 out of the 100. If we think of this as the whole 100. So 24% should be a little less than one of these. And one of these, we know, is a fourth of this thing. So a fourth of 80, I'm just going to look at this 80. So a fourth of 80 would be 20, 20, 20, 20. Now I know that's not all of it, but it's close enough. So we're just getting an approximation just to kind of figure out if our numbers sounds right or not. So here we have $20,210.40. And is that about a fourth of this? And it is. It's pretty close, right? So just a little more than 20,000. So we know that we probably did the problem right. Now, you don't have to do this every time that you have a percent problem, but this helps us to better understand what percent means. And that's really the key, is to find out what percent means. So there's that question. Are there any other questions? No questions from the audience. Okay, so let's look at a couple more of these. Let's just do a few more percents. Does that sound good? Erase. Hopefully, everyone's staying in, having a good summer, enjoying the sun occasionally. And let's look at another percent. So, that's fine. Let's just pick out a number. How about 37? Because that's not a very nice number, is it? 37. I don't know. I always think prime numbers aren't very nice. Some people really like prime numbers. I'm going to put, when I write sevens, I always have a line in it here. because typically in a lot of countries, this is a 1 and this is a 7, and they're pretty close to each other. Way too close, actually. So what we do as mathematicians when we write is we take a 7 and we'll slap a line on it. Because then we know that we're not going to mix up our 7s and our 1s. So that's why we're doing this here. So when you see that on a 7, for me, that's what that means. All right. Oh, I'm running out of breath. All right, so we want to know 37% of, let's say, 3,510. So what does that mean? That means we have this chunk, this whole thing that has 3,510. So it's worth 3,510. Let's make it dollars, just so we have a unit. All right. So now, again, we can figure out all different kinds of things. So here, we have 37. So I'm just going to do the tens again. So, again, I'm going to split it up. And as you do these, you're not going to have to draw pictures every time, but it's really good to show. All right, so what do we know? We know from our past experience that when we split this up into tens, so basically what are we doing? We're dividing it by 10. We can take this decimal and move that over. Now, if you don't know that yet, if it doesn't just come to you, go ahead and actually divide it out and figure out how many would go in each of these columns, and that's okay. So we know that each of these is 3, 5, and 1 because that decimal moved over. So each of these is 351. Now I know you're saying, oh my gosh, why is she doing all of this? This is way too much work. We don't have to do all of that. Just show us how to do the problem. Just show me how to slap them in. But that's not going to really help you. We've got to know. We've got to understand the why part. So here's 10%. Now we don't want 10% though. We want 37. So 30, if each of these is 10% of the whole, that means we need 3 of these. So we have 3 of these. There's our 30%. 30% would be 3. 3 chunks of 10 is 30. So we have 351, 351, 351. So this is going to be 30% of it is 3, 15, 1,052. So that's 30%. Now we need 7% more. So remember what we did on the last round. We took a column and we split it up into 10 pieces, so it gave us 1%. So I'm going to take this column and split it up into 10 pieces. And we know that if we have 351 divided by 10, because we just proved what happens every time this decimal moves over here. So that means each of these little pieces is 35.1. Now again, there are faster ways to do this, but fast isn't always better. It's rarely better. So we do want to be efficient, but we also want to make sure that we understand the concept. So here's 5, 6, 7. So we know we have 35.1, and we have how many of those? 7 of those. You can either multiply by 7 if you want. If you like to do multiplication, you can add 7 of them together, and you should get the same answer every time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So let's prove that we're going to get the same answer. Because this is 7, and there's 7 of them there. So we have 7, 35, 21, 24, and remember this is behind the decimal, so we're going to make that one. Let's make sure we got the same number over here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, we're good with the first digit. And then our decimal. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35. And these are all 3s, fortunately. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 3s. And 8 times 3 is 24. So, whoo-hoo, we did our math right. So now we want to figure that out. 37% of 3,510. Well, we know 30% of it is 1053. That's our 30%. We know that 7% of it is 245.7. So we have $1,298.70. So there we go with that. So we can do it like this and draw a picture every time, or you can, now what we've done each time is we found the 10% mark. It's kind of like a really good place to sit. So we found our 10%, and we also, each time we found the 1%. Now why did we do that? We did it because if you can automatically find out what 10% and what 1% is, then you can find any percentage of anything. So let's do one without drawing the picture. I don't want you to stop drawing the picture now, though, keep doing some picture ones, but I just want to show you that it'll work. So if we wanted to find out what 57% of 362 is, so now we can figure out what 10% of 362. Now remember, 10% of 362, we found out that you move that decimal over. So 10% is 36.2. Why do we care what 10% is? Because any percentage that we get here, we can chop it up. So 57, this is a legal math move. So 57 can be split up into multiple different things. So we could say it's 50% and another 7%, or we could say 10, 10, 10, 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that means this 50 is this whole thing, plus 7, but we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So this is how we're going to do it. Just kind of quick. So now let's find out what 1% is. So 1% of 362. Now we've been taking this and then just moving that decimal over another time. And we're going to do that same thing for here. So we found that this is 10%. We want 1% would be 10% of that. So really it's 10% of 36.2, which is 3.62. Move that decimal point over again. So once we have a 10 and a 1, we can figure everything else out. So 10, that means if we have a 57, we have 50 of these 10%, sorry, 5 of these 10%, so we need 5 of these, and 7 of these. So again, this isn't the fastest way, but this is the way that we can understand what they're asking us. So we have 36.2, we need 5 of these, because it's 50, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. There's our 50. So we're going to add all these people up, and then we have 7%, which means we're going to have 7 1%. So 3.62, 3.62, 3.62, 3.62, 6, 7. Phew! All right. So I'm just going to add all these things up. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. 6 times 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 6 times 5 is 30 plus another 1. And we have 3 times 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is 180. Now let's do this one. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. And then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 6 which is 42 plus another one, 43. And now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 3 is 21 plus a 4 is 25. All right. So here's our 50%. Here's our 7%. So if we want to know 57%, we're going to add these together. All right. 6, 10. Voila! So, voila. Here we go. Does that make sense? 57%. So 57%, sorry, I think I put the decimal place wrong. No? Are we good?
It's 57% of what number?
Where are we? Where are we? Where are we? Oh, here it is.
Ah. Yeah, that sounds right.
Chaos, chaos,
About
chaos.
right.
All right, so we have 57% of 362. Well, let's see if our number, and what we said was 57% of 362. We're saying that that is 208.34. Now, we need to know, does it make sense? Does this make sense? All right, so let's think. If the whole thing is this, 57%, well, we know 50% is half, right? So we know this is going to be a little more than half of whatever this thing. So if we know that this whole thing holds 362, a little more than half is going to be, half is around, I don't know, 362 divided by 2 is 181. So exactly half is 181. But we have 208, so that's a little more than half. So we know that we're probably okay with this answer and can move on. Ta-da! So there's percent. So if you have any other questions that you'd like us to answer, every Wednesday at 1 o'clock, we're going to do math help. So please type in any questions that you might have on our Facebook page or on our Instagram page, and we'll make sure that we respond to your questions. Have a great math day.